Welcome back to Nerd Bites.
Nerd Bites.
My name is Justin. With me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. John Lambert.
How's it going?
Today we have 3 awesome guests because we are on location in Louisville. We just finished up seeing almost a dozen different distilleries and stores. And so let me introduce our guests. First off, we have Mr. John Cagle.
Hey, how's it going?
We have my good friend, Mr. Ron Parker.
Hello, folks.
And back on the pod again is my father, Bill Hildebrand.
Yay. He's so excited to be here.
Enthusiastic as always. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of walk you through the different distilleries we went to and all the different tours and kind of give us some pros and cons. This may sound like a familiar episode because we've done this before, but we actually got to go see a lot of other different places that we didn't see before. And John's with me this time.
Right. I was not here last time.
Which makes it even cooler. So let me go through all the tours we went through. We got here Thursday, tonight, Saturday night, and we're heading out tomorrow. But Thursday we got to go to Maker's Mark. We did the Behind the Bourbon tour, which cost $65. We also then went to Angel's Envy, Bottle Your Own. That was $150. On Friday, we got up and went to Heaven Hill. We did the You Do You tour, which is also a Bottle Your Own for $45, plus we paid for an additional bottle. We then went to Willett and Jim Beam just to check out the distilleries. No tours, and we wrapped up the day on Friday with Buffalo Trace, doing the Trace tour. And then finally today, we went to Kentucky Peerless, did a tour called the Distillery Tour. We went to Old Forester, called the Old Forester Tour. We went to Michter's to buy something fancy in the morning, and then we wrapped up the day with the Bardstown Collaboration Experience, which was basically just a tasting. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through every one of these, and let's hear some pros and cons, things we liked, and then we'll kind of pick our winners. Does that sound good, fellas?
Sounds amazing.
Okay. Let's start off with Maker's Mark. So again, it was the Behind the Bourbon tour, $65. John, tell everyone what we did while we were there.
So we got a good walking tour of the campus, and it really is a campus because it's a pretty big property, and it is way outside Louisville. So it was over an hour away from where we are right now, like maybe even more than that. So we got it was a good first tour because it went through the whole process, and I feel like every single subsequent tour after that kind of went through the same process, but it went through like the water and the grain and the barrel and the mash bill and like the whole distillation process, and we got to see everything and everything up to the rick houses and the aging and how they dump and how then bottling and everything like that. And then we got to pick from a selection of bottles and dip our own. Yeah, we could do like I did 2. I think a couple other people did 2, but you could pick. They had probably like I think 4 or 5 that you could choose from to dip your own, and we just kind of did that. Sat in line, had to like get all gloved up and masked up and everything, and then dip in your own bottle. You could not. All of us really wanted to slam dunk it, but it was a very shallow basin, so there was only a certain like depth that you could get to, which kind of disappointed me because I really wanted to do that, but it was still a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I feel like that's something they've maybe adjusted over time.
I'm sure they have, yeah.
So our tour guide was Marge. So John, let's start with you. John, number 2. What was your favorite part about Angel's Envy? I'm sorry, about Maker's Mark.
For me, I think 2 things. One, coming up from Atlanta, Maker's is on the way, Loretto, Kentucky, which is great. So saving about an hour of end time in transit. But the dip your own bottle experience was amazing. It's a lot of fun to do that. Anyone who's had Maker's in the past, you know like what that wax is like. You've got the bottle in the store. Being able to do it yourself, kind of put your own flavor on it and try to get as much wax on there as possible was a lot of fun. That was my favorite part of the tour.
Yeah. Ron?
I always enjoyed the history part of everything that we saw, and especially Maker's Mark. It's one of the bigger distilleries down here, and I like how they went through the history. So that was my favorites.
Dad, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I'm going to say one thing. I just so taken back by my oldest son inviting me to this trip that made me feel so good. I love him so much. And the other 4 gentlemen who went along and they allowed me to be part of this trip. I'm so excited about that. Thank you so much. Maker's Mark was fun to do. The dipping was great. The whole experience is wonderful. I'm just glad I was a part of this thing. Thank you.
I will say one more thing about Maker's Mark is the couple that joined the tour late made it very unbearable. Unbearable is probably the wrong word. But
can you tell me more about the red wax?
Can you tell me more about the red? They were just asking a lot of like dumb questions or like really obvious questions, and they were the only people, and it was like question, answer, follow up question, answer, follow up question, answer, and I could tell just the whole group was like, just shut up so we can just move on to the next part of this tour.
Yeah, were there any other aspects of this that we especially didn't like besides that?
And that was not an indictment of Makers.
Yeah.
That was just the group, and the group is a crapshoot. Like, you can have a good one or you can have a bad one, and turns out those two people were 10 minutes late, so it would have been a totally different experience had they just not showed up. But whatever.
I'll add one thing. I think beautiful campus, very photogenic. They'd been doing a lot of construction and expansion, so there were some heavy equipment around, some cranes, things like that. Like, what part of the experience is like taking some nice photos, and you got some, beautiful old buildings that are kind of right on this lake and this river, but in the back of everyone is like a giant pick crane. Like, that kind of sucked. But, what are you going to do?
And the drive there was kind of crazy because there's a one-lane road all the way down there, it seemed like, and you go up and down these hills, and all the cows are I think even the cows were looking, going, "Where are you going?" So that was kind of crazy and interesting, but overall the experience was great.
Yeah, I think when you look at it, the tour itself, the dipping, all in all, worth the money.
Definitely.
I should say,
Yes.
you also heard on Mike, our producer, Mr. Justin Sywell. He's here with us, and he's going to interject some few things as we go along as well.
Well, I'm a little drunk, so
Yeah, okay.
that's going to happen.
So I will not call on you as much, but feel free to.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't. No, that's going to be okay.
That's fine.
All right. Back behind the curtain. We had a little bit of a break. We checked into our Airbnb, and then we went to Angel's Envy. And this is downtown Louisville, so we've been doing a little bit of driving this day, obviously getting in town. But now we went to downtown, we went to Angel's Envy. This was the bottle of your own. So for $150, they put you in a room, and essentially they tell you about the two different types of bourbons or whiskeys you're going to try, and then you get to walk next door and bottle your own. Now, I've done this before, so I'm going to kind of reserve some of my feelings first. But Dad, why don't we start with you? What was one of your favorite aspects of Angel's Envy?
First of all, it's a great facility, and the bottling them, it sounds like you're doing a lot of stuff, but you're actually taking a bottle, putting it underneath the pump, pushing the lever, and it goes in. But it's kind of cool doing it because you feel like you're doing something. It's just, this is your bottle. That was nice. I like that aspect of the whole thing.
Yeah. What about you, John?
So one of the most interesting things about that is they take kind of the low wine, right, like your moonshine, and use it to clean the tables and everything else, and they literally sprayed it into our hands, and we slurped it out of the hands. Like,
I'm glad you said it because I was going to say it too.
that was a very unique experience. Never before have I had a cleaning solution directly from a cleaning bottle before that I drank intentionally. I was very happy about that.
Twice.
Well, and to be clear, in case anyone's curious what the hell we're talking about, we weren't just drinking cleaning solution. Matt, who was our tour guide, who was really pretty hilarious, he essentially shared that their cleaning solution is their White Dog. It's basically their moonshine before it's distilled and turned into bourbon whiskey.
140, 150
Right.
proof or something like that.
So he says,
it's
"Do you
gonna,
wanna-"
it's going to disinfect anything.
But also, let's try it and drink it.
And he couldn't legally serve it in a glass, so we had to spray it in our hand.
Yeah.
I grew up in Lime, which folks out there may know Lime or you may not, but done a lot of things, but I don't think, once again, to reiterate, I've never drank out of my hand. That was a highlight of my experience, and Matt was unbelievable. He knew the crowd. He kind of looked around and even said that, "Hey, I think it might be time to move on because you guys are ready to drink." So I appreciated that. So
Definitely read the room.
And he was very thankful we weren't the group of drunk 21-year-olds that came in like right when we were coming in for our tour.
Yeah, and like I said, I've done this before. I got to do this last year, and they have since changed things around. It's a brand new bottle, and obviously it's a different single barrel.
No box.
But let's start with some cons. I think a con for me was that I did sell that you're going to get this nice fancy box, and no one got one. So I have one, and these guys don't have one.
Yeah, but that looks like some pretty good stuff, though. It's got great color. It's 115, so you can only get something that's 115 proof there. Every other single barrel is 110, so
Yeah.
it's got that going for it. So I think it's gonna be good.
Yeah, it was also nice that we kind of wrapped the tour up because it was a very short one, and it's not a giant distillery or facility, right?
No.
The shopping, like the actual shopping area is as big, maybe not as big, but looks like it could be as big as the actual area where they walk you through, where they're distilling the whiskey. And then you pop out, just like with everything, you pop right out at the bar, and we had a round of drinks, and then we hit the road. So it was kind of nice to wrap that up at the end of the night. Friday, we got up nice and early. We went and checked out some places, tried to find some drops. Where we ended up first was Jim Beam, and we didn't do a tour there, but I do think it's worth just kind of mentioning that we went to the campus, we walked around, went to the shop. They were super friendly, right? John, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, no, they were great. Great campus, huge, and it's one of those where you can kind of see it, but all the rick houses are right there, and they are they don't look that big like from the road, and then you get close to them, and they are huge, and I feel like they're constantly expanding. So that was really cool to see.
Well, not to joke around, but we did kind of like say like they had a giant fire there years ago, right, Ron, when we were there? And so they've since kind of moved things around, I think, to where maybe the rick houses aren't as close, and maybe obviously a lot more safety precautions because they've lost a lot of product.
Well, that was Heaven Hill. That wasn't Jim Beam.
No, Jim Beam had a fire.
Oh, they had
also
they had a fire
couple years
too?
ago.
Okay.
Yeah. What was your favorite part there, Ron?
Once again with me, it's people. I just thought there was product there that they were offering that day, so there were a lot of people. But I thought folks, customers included, everyone was just very easygoing. Got in. Hey, they've stepped out and said we have plenty of what you folks are looking for. Don't crowd anybody. I thought everybody was friendly and pretty well behaved for standing in a line and going through. So I enjoyed that part.
Yeah,
The Bourbon community is a good community.
for the most part.
For the most part.
So then we got to go to Willett. Also didn't do a tour, but Cagle, I want you to talk about your Willett experience because I feel like they was almost tailored towards you a little bit.
Oh, so Willett. Yeah, sorry. So it took me a minute to remember which one we were talking about there. So we go to Willett, and it's actually a distillery I don't know a lot about. I'm a little bit more of a sideline fan than some of your normal hosts and people that are on this podcast. But walked in, looked around a little bit, didn't buy any whiskey there, but I had basically for the day had been complaining that there wasn't any coffee in my life so far. We, in our Airbnbs, which are nicely appointed, I would say, they've given us Keurig machines, and we had regular coffee, but nothing available for K-Pod. So got there, kind of walk in the back, and the tour guide's like, hey, or the girl at the counter said, there's really great coffee in the back. Got to go back there, had a fantastic experience at a coffee bar, and it was delicious, and it completely made my day for the rest of the day. So thank you very much, Willett.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was specially sourced coffee beans. It was delicious.
And the espresso machine, or whatever the fancy term is, was like custom made for Willett by a company in Germany, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and in hindsight, that's one that I would like to definitely go back to and do a tour of.
Agreed.
And namely because, like John said, that I don't know a lot about it. I'd like to learn more. All right, so then we went to our tours. We had these are pretty much the two big blue bloods as far as all the distilleries we went to. Two of the three at least. We went to Heaven Hill. We did the You Do You tour, which is the bottle your own. Very, very similar to Angel's Envy. Dad, what was something that you liked about the Heaven Hill tour? Because again, it was the same thing. You kind of showed up, got to look around campus a little bit, but they basically put you in a room, you taste things, and you go next door and you get to bottle something.
It was just cool bottling your own stuff. It was fun. The lady in charge was very informative, and we have a choice of 4 different bourbons to bottle, in which we all chose something similar or whatever. But the whole show was great. The whole thing was great. The people were great. You just find yourself enjoying yourself because they're so informative and they keep telling you what's going on. And I just liked it a lot. I liked the place. One of my favorite places.
Yeah. Ron, what about you?
Yeah, it's similar to Bill. I mean, it's don't want to repeat anything, but people are friendly. She was very informative. Learned a lot. That was one of the places I think I learned a lot more than some of the other folks.
Yep.
So,
A lot of history and a lot of like connecting the dots of like, this is why, and you're like, oh, so that's why
Right.
that's why they did that, and that's why it's called that. And
Yeah, and
it's
so
pretty cool.
that was Haley, and she really did a good job of telling us the 4 options we were given was the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, which almost all of us went with. The second option was the Larceny Barrel Proof, which producer Justin, he was the outlier that got that one. And they also had the Bernheim Bolt,
The weeded whiskey, the weeded barrel proof.
Barrel Proof. And lastly was the
It was the Heaven Hill Select Stock.
Select Stock, yeah. So there were some pretty awesome bottles, and they were all, it was like $150 for the Select Stock, and I think the other ones were either $80 or $70 basically.
Yep.
Yeah. So we all went with the Elijah Craig because it was 130 something proof, so it was kind of hard to pass up.
That's where like I think she talked the most early, the first person to talk about how interconnected all these kind of founders are and how close they were originally. Like you've got folks that have joined and broken up companies over the years, and like talked about like some of the connections between some of these original founding families, which I thought was interesting.
And just learning too about where the names come from, right? And so it's like one of the founders was locked up, so that's why they call larceny larceny. There's actually a key that's on the
He
bottle.
was stealing whiskey.
He was stealing it, right?
Yeah.
And then where they had to move when they had some big like catastrophe, or maybe I think it was a hurricane or a fire, that's what they moved to Bernheim, and that's basically one of the counties in Kentucky, right? So just I don't know. There's so much more behind it. I'm not doing it justice. The last one we went to was, again, this is probably the one almost everyone knows the most, and that's Buffalo Trace. I'd never been there. So who here had been to Buffalo Trace before? Dad?
Just him.
So
Yes, I have.
So how long ago were you there?
Probably 10 years ago,
How much has it changed since then?
dramatically.
Yeah.
It was a lot bigger, a lot more expansive. The shop itself was like 3 times the size it used to be, but the show itself, the bourbon they have itself is the same because they do the same thing over and over again. The only thing we got to see the last time, which we didn't see this time, was them bottling Blanton's, which is a conveyor belt type thing, and they have the bottle come down and they have the bourbon go in it, and it goes to the next guy and he puts a netting on, the next guy puts a lid on it and the label, and they bottle it. And Blanton's they have this little thing that is BLANTONS, and they go, each one has a little horse on it. It's like a horse race kind of thing. And it's funny because I happened to ask the guy back then, how do you know what label or what horse station you have to put on top of the bottle? He goes, we don't know. We have X amount of B, X amount of L, and so on. And when we run out in the box, we get a new box. And I was just dumbfounded by that because it's like, that's so simple and so cool. So they were very, very informative, and it's kind of cool to see this stuff happen.
Yeah.
But they do it by hand. It's not like a conveyor belt people. The people we saw what was going on this time we're there, and they just kind of everything's by hand. It's really kind of cool.
Yeah. Ron, what about you? What was your favorite part of Buffalo Trace?
Yeah, once again, the tour, I'm really into like old architecture, and when you look around the buildings, you see, what they were, because they point a lot of that out, and then they're showing you what they've done, and how the production in the last 10 or 15 years from some of the expansion they made is went from kind of a smaller, well-known almost now to a corporation. So I think that's what got me.
What's cool about this too is it's called the Trace Tour. It's free, and Bob was our tour guide. And I didn't expect at the end of this, because the way the tour works with this one is you actually go see the entire campus.
Yeah, it's a walking tour.
It's a walking tour, right?
Yep.
We got lucky because it was kind of rainy, but it wasn't when we were doing the tour. And at the end, they bring you into the room above the above the shop, and you actually get to taste a few things, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to try E.H. Taylor, Buffalo Trace, the Wheatley vodka. We also got to try the bourbon cream, and finally the Freddy's root beer. But again, it doesn't cost any money. You just got to make sure you get in there and get it reserved, which it books up super quick. Like when I booked this, it was like within 3 minutes, every single tour was sold out for like weeks at a time. Okay, any negatives to Buffalo Trace we didn't like?
The only thing about Buffalo Trace I didn't like was how kind of busy it felt. I mean, it's definitely, the craft is still there. They're producing a lot of really fantastic product, but it's a lot of people around, a lot of people in the gift shop. You could tell how popular it is, and it's definitely kind of one of your key stops with the buses and things like that. So that was the only downside, probably.
Yep.
It felt bottleneck too, just the fact that when you drive in, you go down this gigantic hill, and then you pull in, and it's like everyone's convening at once, and then you go into the parking lot, and there's parking attendants, and then you have to park, and then everyone, it was just overwhelming a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But if you do have a chance to mix bourbon cream and root beer, like definitely do
That was good.
That was good.
I did notice one thing, though. I didn't notice it until this afternoon, this morning when we went to Peerless Distillery. If you notice, all the warehouses, the old ones, the Buffalo Trace, Peerless, and the other ones, if you walk in the warehouse, all the beams supporting the building are wooden beams. It's not a metal, so it's old. It shows you how old it is, because back then in the early 1900s, all these places were built with wooden beams, and I caught my eye today how much wood's involved with building those buildings. So if there's a fire breaks out, they're in trouble, because Jim Beam had a fire a couple of years ago, and they lost a whole warehouse because of that. So it's kind of interesting to look at that stuff.
Well, that's what they always say. Like it's wood and alcohol and fire all do not mix very well.
Yeah, they don't mix.
All right, finally today, and this is a good segue because, Dad, you mentioned that we went to Peerless. Before we went to Peerless, though, we did go to Michter's, and we happened to get there early, and we got a couple fancy drops. Was there anything that just stood out? Like, Lambert, let me start with you because I know you and your brother like Michter's, that stood out as far as, like, just walking into the Fort Nelson distillery?
I mean, we didn't, like you said, we didn't really get to do a tour. We didn't do a tasting, so we were kind of in and out. It's small. Mm-hmm. It's really small. I know that that's not their main production facility. Their main production is actually outside of town, but yeah. So it almost felt like that's more of like the storefront, so to speak, to it, and very similar to, and we're going to talk about it in a second, Bardstown, of where that's just kind of the face of it, and then everything else is behind the scenes.
Right. Yeah, I just thought that would be worth mentioning. And they did have a couple releases they did this morning, and there were people lined up outside. You were lucky enough to get the 10-year.
Yep, the 10-year bourbon.
Which was great. And then the clan that went with me to go get coffee, we were a few more people behind line, so we ended up getting just the barrel proof rye. Still a good bottle, though.
Which is still not bad.
I was happy about that regardless. Okay, on to Peerless. So Kentucky Peerless, we did what's called the distillery tour. Our tour guide was Bill. And he was, it was a really neat tour. Cagle, maybe tell us about kind of how Peerless, how the Peerless tour worked itself.
Yeah, so Peerless for me is something I'd never been introduced to before. Wasn't aware of the brand of the whiskey. I've probably seen it in stores, but something was pretty new to me overall. I think very small operation, very craft feeling in terms of like how they're producing and what they're managing in terms of volume. We had a chance to meet the owner, who they said is there 6 days a week. He came in the beginning of the tour and told some really fantastic stories. Corky is the 4th generation owner.
That guy's had a life. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, highly recommend if you're going to go and do this tour, do it soon so you can hear some feedback from Corky, because it was pretty amazing to just listen to that guy talk. And I could have spent 5 minutes walking around and 55 minutes listening to him talk.
Yep.
Yeah, and then it ends with a tasting. Ron, tell us about how the tasting went.
Oh, of all the places we went, it was probably my favorite top to bottom. There were a few places that, you had a few favorites. You might have one or two that really stood out. This one, I had a hard time deciding at the end what I wanted to buy, because I thought each one was just as good as the other, and ended up buying what I wanted at the time. But if I wouldn't have been the last place, I'd probably bought 5 more bottles there, so it was good.
Yeah, and they brought out 4 to taste, and then they brought out 4 more for us to have after the tasting.
Right.
So it seemed to keep going.
Like, you guys want to try some more stuff? Sure.
Yeah. Dad, here's a good question for you. Who do you think you'd be better best friends with, Corky or Bob, the tour guide from Buffalo Trace the day before that?
Boy, is that a tough question, because I liked them both a lot. Bob probably be the best partner to go hang out and have a drink with, because he had these stupid jokes out, and he always turned around and looked at me for some reason. What was that? I said, that was good. Or no, that wasn't very good. So he goes, okay, I'm going to judge what you say. But I can't say enough good things about all the tour guides. They all did a good job. I really enjoyed being around them. Sometimes a little winded. I mentioned to a couple of them, say, less talky, more drinky. And then they go, okay. And so they stop talking a little bit. So that's my contribution to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So weird that Bob had you picked out as the dad joke guy. Yeah.
He almost pulled me up front. He goes, you stand here. I said, listen, okay, less talking, more drinking.
It might have been the immediate feedback you gave him on every joke he told. That's plausible.
It probably was.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's actually a good segue to our second to last one, which was we went to Old Forester next. And like, speaking of like knowledgeable guides, I think this was probably the one, Carly was her name, who I believe probably gave us the most like dense information throughout the process of like the entire tour. And the tour itself was called just the Old Forester tour. Lambert, tell us kind of how that tour went, or even if there's any major differences between that and any of the big tours that we did.
She kept calling it Old Foe. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, she'd refer to Old Forester as Old Foe. But again, yeah, very knowledgeable. Like, talked about the history again, and it was actually kind of cool because she asked everybody, like, have you gone on another distillery tour? Of like kind of gauging the audience of like, yes. So like, not to say that she didn't go through the whole spiel of like the grain and the still and the mash and the whatever, but like she knew that like we had already seen all this, and like the process of making whiskey is the same for everybody. It's just the differences are the wood, the mash bill, and and the aging process and everything like that. So that was cool. Kind of not really like disparaging towards other distilleries, but like kind of not necessarily talking bad about them, but more like kind of like this is why we're better than everybody else kind of thing. And you didn't get that from really anybody else. It was more just like they were focused on what them and what they do, and not really focused on like how they compare to everybody else. So that was different. But other than that, like it was a good tour. She was very knowledgeable.
She was kind of not talking down, but looking down on them a little bit because they've been around so long, which was
which
fine.
wasn't talking shit.
Yeah,
But she just knew she was better.
But
they were
just
better.
the air of elitism, I guess, is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, it's kind of like how Cagle talks to me.
Yeah.
Like a little bit.
Well,
I
yeah.
mean, it's rightfully so. I think. Ofo, as
and
she
how you
called it.
talk to me.
And so I gotta
how-
pay it forward to somebody else.
And how everyone talks about Ofo. Like we talked about this a little bit right before this show. $4 billion company owns Jack Daniel's. Like this is like blue blood whiskey making, in a lot of ways. But like she leaned into the differentiation, as you mentioned, and one of the ways she did that was like talking a lot about them making their own barrels, and like, they have the little kind of Cooper display set up.
Yep.
But we talked about them.
You got to fire one
Justin got because happy birthday,
because it was his birthday.
It was my birthday all weekend.
And I got to seal a plug.
He stole a bung. Yeah, it's in his pocket right now.
Oh, good. And now you've admitted it on the air. Ronnie, anything you want to add as far as like pros and cons of Old Forester?
No, what I always enjoyed, she mentioned she's been doing this for 7 years, and I'm not sure she's that old. So you can tell their employees are probably treated pretty well, and she acted like she enjoyed what she was talking about. Yeah, a little air of maybe we do things a little better. I didn't get so much her talking down. I got, hey, we have the money, because she mentioned, hey, we have money, we can do this better. And you could tell she was excited
Jack
about her
Daniel's
company.
money.
She did mention Jack Daniel's money.
Jack Daniel's money, yeah.
Yeah, her name was Elizabeth, and I'm sorry, like I said, her name was Carly. But the last tour we went to was, the tour guide was named Elizabeth. This was Bardstown. This is called the Collaboration Experience. And I've actually gone on their website to try and find this tour again. I don't know if they're switching things up, but they've got like a really unique approach to the way that they do just the visits to their, as Lambert mentioned, like their storefront, so to speak, like an Angel's Envy or something like that. So let's talk about the Bardstown Collaborative Experience. None of us had any experience with Bardstown at all. Right, I think
I'd never even had it.
I don't think I've ever had. Maybe I've sampled like one, but I was not even paying attention to it. So, like Lambert, why don't you talk about this? Because as probably the expert in the room as far as bourbon is concerned or whiskey, I think you are in the. I said in the room.
Oh, in the room.
Yeah.
There you go. Fair enough. Fair enough.
What was your kind of overall impressions about? Like, tell us what they did and like how maybe they were unique than any other tastings we've done.
So the storefront first, we felt like it belongs in Frontenac. Like that's what we arrived at. Like it is it's very clean. It looks like a museum almost of just, it's very clean. It's very well lit. Like you look like it looks like a high-end department store, like a high-end store that you would see in, like, that's why I arrived at Frontenac, because like that could be, a Louis Vuitton or like a Tiffany's, just because you just kind of had that air about it. And yeah, and like maybe because like, and we were talking about this while we were sitting waiting for the tour or waiting for the tasting, because it wasn't a tour, because they do all their stuff off site. So this is really like a storefront kind of experience of like you get a tasting and then you're in the store and then that's it. Like they're kind of catering to their audience of like they're the new kids on the block, so they have to set themselves apart somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to like what they're doing of like, they were founded by a kid, like a guy who was a billionaire when he was 25 years old. And he was like, I want to start doing this. Oh, we can't do that. Well, then fine, I'll start doing it myself. And like, so they take chances, they take risks. They just kind of do whatever the hell they want to. And it seems to be working for them because They're like just like everybody else in the whiskey industry. They seem to be growing. They seem to be expanding. They're gaining new partnerships. They were talking about some of their recent collaborations and some of the stuff they have coming up. And it's just an interesting process because it's not just like your typical like distiller of like, well, we have our mash bill, we put it in the barrel, it ages, and then we taste it, and maybe it turns into a single barrel, maybe it turns into a small batch, maybe it turns into like a high end premium offering or whatever, and then that's it. They don't really do that. They're always looking for new ways and new collaborations and new people to work with to just kind of experiment and find different flavors.
Yeah, so I guess the billionaire founder also was involved with Earthlink, founded Earthlink.
He founded Earthlink
back in the day. Cagle, you said this a lot of times. Tell me what you thought as far as like the way the space looked and like maybe their marketing strategy.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly are marketing to a high-end clientele. I feel like a Cartier store when you walk in, like lit shelves, like well-spaced product. Like there's a ton of square footage for very little actual product and sales. I thought they're definitely going for that kind of clientele, that audience. And it feels like new money versus old money. I think I mentioned this to you guys off air. It's hard to imagine three more different experiences and then we had today with Peerless, Old Forester, and then Bardstown. And Bardstown, you're right, new kids on the block doing things very differently, and it feels like they're just going to do it their own way. They were also pretty open in admitting mistakes and changes. Even one of the things they had on their tasting, Elizabeth said, "Hey, like we had these barrels, we put this stuff in, it was great. Ended up not being so great, so we blended it after the fact, and here's what we got. And you guys try this." Like it's like that founder mentality, like fail fast, move forward, just like be open and transparent with issues. And I think they probably have a very long runway. It wasn't, after I think hindsight wasn't my favorite experience of the day, but definitely different and unique, and I was glad we went.
Yeah, I don't think there's any of these that I would have said like let's not do this again. I felt like we had there were good aspects of every one of these tours or tastings or experiences, whatever it was. So before we kind of go through, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of pick our favorites of a couple different categories. But I do want to hear from producer Justin because he's been so patiently sitting over here just watching us talk about all the things that you did along with us. Like, right? I mean, it was a team of 6 that really went through this entire trip. So is there anything that you wanted to add as far as anything that maybe we forgot to talk about, a pro or a con of any of the distilleries? So Angel's Envy, Maker's Mark, Heaven Hill, Buffalo Trace, Rabbit Hole, Old Forester, or Bardstown.
I think the only thing I can add that you guys haven't already hit is that I'm kind of impressed by the way each of them approaches their culture or their organizational culture. That's kind of where I geek out. My nerd is that. And like how they take their lore and whatnot. What I found interesting was I think this was a good survey of distilleries that you put together, Justin, because like you had the Blue Bloods, you had the new kids on the block, and you had some stuff in between. And I thought that was really interesting. The other thing that I really noticed about the tours, and I appreciated, was that even if you weren't a bourbon nerd, if you were an architectural nerd, if you were a history nerd, if you were a dad joke nerd, if you were, even if you were kind of reluctantly going to one of these bourbon tours because maybe your partner wants to go or whatever, you'll still have a great time. They really wrap a whole bunch of different aspects into each experience. So you don't have to just love bourbon to appreciate this. It's really an interesting experience. The only other thing I'd say is the biggest regret that I have is not buying the cognac bottle from Peerless. Like, I now regret that. I want to go back and buy it.
We can go back in the morning.
We should
might
go back
do
and
that.
split it.
Okay, Bill, you and me, let's go back. We'll buy one. And now I'll start coming over to your house every night.
Every night.
Every night.
So
Justin?
let's go through the categories. We're going to just kind of go around. We'll take turns going around in circles and essentially say what our favorite one is. So we're going to start with best tour, right? So let's take the ones that we visited out for this conversation, or really just this vote. Who do we think had the best like tour? Which one did you enjoy the most based on just the overall experience? Like, who would you say you need to go do this tour to someone coming to Louisville next week? So I'll go first, and we'll go around to Ronnie next. I'm going to say that my favorite overall tour, it's hard not to say Peerless. I love the intimacy, and I love the additional tastings, just the whole thing. We walked out. I think that was the happiest I walked out, probably because they gave us more alcohol than most places, but it was the happiest I walked out of all the tours for the entire trip. Ron.
I got two. Angel's Envy. Matt was awesome. He read the crowd, like I said earlier, kind of knew what we were there for. We got the bottle. That was fun. And then obviously Peerless. Meet the owner and the history behind the owner that we don't have time to bring all of now, but the stories this man could tell about Patton, and it went anywhere from Patton to Al Capone, and it fascinated me. So
And the
I would
Allman
say,
Brothers.
yeah, Peerless.
And Al
Peerless
Gore.
And Al Gore.
Al Gore. He roomed with the Allman Brothers in a military camp when they were young. So, fascinating, but not anything to do with bourbon, but it was fun. Peerless and Angel's Envy for me.
Dad?
I gotta say, Peerless. Meeting the owner and talking to him and talking about history and as they're talking about his relationship with Al Capone, or not relationship, but knowing him and knowing the people. And he was in Missouri for a short time in St. Louis. He knew my family's restaurants, Miss Hulling's. It was interesting and kind of fun to talk to him about because we can relate a little bit. Yeah, that was probably the highlight of my trip, just talking to somebody that actually knew my grandmother, which is really great.
So I'm going to go a little differently. I think I love Peerless, and we'll talk about that more later. But Makers for me was a fantastic tour. Beautiful property. You get to walk around, the place, see a lot of history there. They're doing a lot of things that you wouldn't think a big company's doing. Like I pick up a bottle of Makers in the store, like I don't think twice about it. They're still hand cutting paper labels for those bottles. Like they're still dipping in red wax. Like I think a lot of that tradition, a lot of that stuff's still there. It was a pretty cool experience overall.
Lambert?
I was going to say the same thing, Makers. Just a good overall experience. And maybe I'm a little biased because that was the first one, but like it was a great introduction to like what we were going to experience for the whole weekend.
Finally, Justin.
Hands down, Peerless was my favorite. I actually loved all of them, but Peerless by far and away. All the reasons already stated. And then the other thought that came to my mind when I was there, I was really struck by how much of every place that we visit was not automated, was not machined, was not, there were assembly lines, but nothing overly complicated. This is still an industry that is very hands-on, crafted, like artisans are doing this. And I love that. And I feel like Peerless is now where like Makers and Old Forester were many, many, many years ago. And that's what I really kind of like. I felt Peerless was like, you are the future history of this, of like, you're going to grow eventually and do that.
All right, Peerless wins. Best overall guide. All right, so the person that giving the tour, Justin, you get to go first on this one.
Can you count Corky? Because he was awesome.
Yeah, sure. Peerless,
Yeah,
the duo.
The duo, because the old guy telling his stories that owns the distillery, that was awesome. But my second choice would be Matt. As far as actual guides, would be Matt.
John,
Where was Matt?
Angel's Envy.
Angels.
Angels of, oh yeah. Yeah, Matt was good. I'm gonna go Heaven Hill.
Okay.
I thought she was extremely knowledgeable. I felt like I learned the most about like the company that we were seeing from her. Like learned
Yeah.
a lot about Heaven Hill and a lot about the history and like the interconnecting between like all these guys came from like it's a giant family tree and they all kind of branched off and started doing their own thing. So I thought that was really cool.
Cagle.
Yeah, I'm going to go Carly from today. I think at Old Forester, I thought she did a fantastic job. She's quick, she's witty, she was, on time, connected. Good conversation.
Yeah. Dad?
I think Carly as well. I think she did a great job. But the second person is the guy, Matt at Heavens
Angel's Envy.
Angel Envy. If he doesn't have a job at that, he should be an auctioneer.
Agreed.
Because
Hands
he
down.
talks so fast. And you go, slow down for a minute. Like, quit smoking that crack and please, slow down.
But you like that.
I did like it. I actually understood it.
Can I just say for the record, I'm so shocked you didn't go with Bob, your boy, the dad joke guy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm shocked you didn't go to Bob.
was a good guy.
Bob G.
Ronnie?
I got his phone number.
No, you did not. You did not.
Only you, Bill. Only you. Carly was the most informative. I thought Matt knew who he was talking to. We got the dip stuff straight out, and like I say, we never drank out of my hand out of a spray bottle before. So that was fun. That was the fun trip, and I thought Carly was so informative. I enjoyed her information. So
Yeah, I think that it's okay to say it's a tie between Matt and Carly with Angel's Envy and with Old Foe.
Ofo.
But honestly, there was not a single guide that wasn't awesome. Like I thought they were all very good. This is like
They were all
different-
really
This
good.
is different levels of
Yeah.
like kind of like pick your own poison, right? Okay, so
and,
now
and also all different ages too. Like
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting that you have people who are just starting in their careers and people who are clearly this is their retirement gig and they want to do it, and then other people who've been in this industry their entire career. It was interesting.
yeah, and I don't remember if I mentioned it, but Elizabeth at Bardstown was also. I feel like she was kind of doing something super unique because she's really almost like she was explaining how this company is traversing like almost an old industry in a new way. And she was also new to the game too, so I don't know. I thought that was just kind of a unique perspective. So.
Everything with Bardstown tracked of like
Yeah.
we're disrupting the way bourbon is made, we're disrupting the way bourbon is sold, we're disrupting the story about bourbon, and we're also disrupting the employees that come into bourbon.
Yeah.
I thought that was everything about Bardstown's screen disruption, which I thought was cool.
Yeah. So let's do tasting next. We're gonna do zigzag. I'm gonna call on you randomly, as if this is class. So overall tasting experience. So Cagle, you go first.
Peerless, hands down.
Okay. Lambert.
Yeah, just because of the sheer amount of stuff that we got to try, it was fantastic.
Right. Ronnie.
Definitely Peerless. Nothing against the rest of the folks. It was really good bourbon, but yeah, Peerless was good.
Dad.
Definitely Peerless.
Okay. Justin.
Peerless.
I do want to say though, I think that I'm also voting Peerless. It was fucking awesome. But I do want to also give a shout out to Heaven Hill because I do think, and even Angel's Envy, even though it was only 2, I thought Heaven Hill was neat because not only were we tasting 4 distinct different things, we also got to actual bottle the one that we chose that we personally liked.
Yeah, I
the
thought that
best.
was cool.
That's true.
And
That
things
was-
that were only available there too, like things you're not going to get elsewhere. I mean, like
Yeah.
things that are unique.
Like these single barrels for sure. Okay, shop. I mean, do we need to literally argue which one had the best shop? I don't know if we do or not, but
Probably not.
I think it's Buffalo Trace, right? Buffalo Trace, just to give you a perspective, I think, again, all the shops had their own kind of unique things, but all of them were almost like within the building. Buffalo Trace's shop was a completely separate building itself. It was an entire floor. It was fucking gigantic.
It might have been the size of all the other shops combined.
Yeah, and it reminded me a lot of if there's ever a store that reminded me more of like the end of a ride in Disney, that was it. Right? I mean, it was so and anything you could possibly think of to put a logo on
Everything.
was there.
Everything.
And they also have all the different brands, and every single one of those brands had the same amount of branded logoed things.
There's like a barrel of golf balls with each whiskey on it.
Right.
Just pick your poison.
They had ornaments for every single brand. They had different Glencairns. They had shirts. They had, literally name it. They even
Do you
had
want
like
a stuffed animal buffalo with Buffalo Trace on it?
I got
Because
one.
There it is. Yeah, there you go.
You had to get one for the kids.
Okay, finally, the last thing is just kind of the best overall. I think this is going to be pretty hard to decide because I think that we kind of have a lot of really pros and cons to everything. I will start just because I'll just fall on this grenade. Again, I think my favorite thing to take home might be the Angel's Envy bottle that we got to actual bottle ourselves. I think that's pretty cool. Some of the other things we found at the shops and stores was pretty great, but I think that the overall experience, you don't need to tell people go to Buffalo Trace, but I think you need to tell people to go to Peerless. So that's my best overall. That was my number one favorite experience. Lambert, you go next.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Like, one of my favorite things that I'm going to take home is the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof that we bottled at Heaven Hill. That's obviously it's a single barrel. It's exclusive to that. You can't find it in stores, so it's pretty great. And we got to taste it before we bottled it, so it was awesome. But yeah, I agree with you. It was Peerless, just kind of top to bottom. Like, it was just a good one. And yeah, I totally agree with what you said. Like, you don't need to convince people to go to Jim Beam or Heaven Hill or even Makers, but like, check out Peerless. Like, you need to go to Peerless.
Cagle?
Yeah, I was going to do the same thing as Lambert. Shout out Heaven Hill and Peerless. One thing at Peerless is 20 people work at Peerless total, 20 associates. I think there's probably 5,000 or 6,000 that work at Old Forester. So I think, big difference. Definitely go check them out. That was amazing.
Ronnie?
Yeah, we're going to go back to Peerless, not sound like broken record, but same way, just quaint. I'm way more into mom and pop stuff than I am big corporate things. So for me, that was the best.
Dad, do you have a different opinion, or are you sticking with
No,
it?
I'm gonna stay with the same opinion. It's a mom and pop, like Ron said. It's amazing. I grew up in the mom and pop operations myself and my family since 1932, and it's great to see a family shared their experience generation to generation to generation. It was a lot of fun to see and listen to what they got to say.
Producer Justin, do you have anything to add?
Go to Peerless. It's off the beaten track, but go to Peerless.
We are not sponsored by Peerless, believe it or not.
No, we are not.
At least yet, right?
We are welcome to that. Yeah.
So I want
Very
to
open.
let's do some real quick thank yous as we wrap up this episode. I do hope you enjoyed coming to or listening to this episode. Honestly, go to Louisville. There's so much to do. We've already talked about ways we'd improve this trip if we came back again. When we come back again,
When we come back.
perhaps stay. You can really kind of stay in one of three places. You can stay in Frankfurt, do everything around Buffalo Trace. You can stay in downtown Louisville and basically walk the strip, or you can even maybe go to Bardstown and enjoy a festival.
everything there.
And obviously, there's a bunch of different distilleries down there as well. So, Mr. Parker, Ron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you guys. I get invited, and I'm thrilled, and I'll do it again. So hopefully I can come back.
Mr. Cagle, it's always a pleasure to have you on here.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Next time, would you give me some recommendations on a budget before I make something that's totally unattainable?
Yeah, we're not even going to talk about how much money we spent, but Dad, of course, thank you for coming. Thank you for being on the episode. And I don't want to gloss over the fact that you said very nice and loving things to me before we just moved on very quickly. So it was very thoughtful, and I love you too.
Let me express myself, once again, how much I love my little son and how much I love these guys. These guys are like my stepchildren, I guess you would call it, because they welcome me in their open arms to come down to this thing, and I'm really appreciative. Thank you.
It's very sweet. Maybe next time could Matt come too, though?
Yeah, right. Producer Justin, thank you for putting this all together and for joining us.
You put this all together. I just am here.
I meant the equipment for the recording.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for
Like
setting up these microphones.
Actually putting this
I
together.
physically put together the
You
equipment.
physically put all this together.
Thanks for actually inviting me on this one.
You got it.
As
Yeah.
opposed to putting out an episode without me last time.
Well, sometimes you got to make things happen quick.
Yeah.
Mr. Lambert, always a pleasure.
Hey, I think this was great. We will definitely do it again.
Yeah, our next episode preview, we're probably going to break into the ton of bottles that we happen to purchase. So
Well, yeah, I'm sure we'll stick in a movie somewhere in there. But yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to cover.
And I don't know how we're going to get them to you, but don't worry. Those selfies with Justin in the background are coming your way.
No, they are going to get posted.
look for those on social media. Well, until then, until next time, thanks everybody. Okay. We're doing Nerd Bites. I forgot. I think we were going to do Nerd Bites. 'Cause I think they don't have to be video. So Nerd Takes. Let's do bites. Let's do bites. It'll be an audio bite. You've got your cut scene now. Okay. So, do you not know that we're podcasting? Why don't you get your wine out of here?
There's a bug in his wine.
Edit the. All right.
No, keep that in.
I'm leaving it
You
in.
motherfucker. Okay.
My favorite thing about this trip has been the intentional exclusion of Justin from every photograph opportunity. Being able to put him in the background, make sure that he's not like he's in the photo, but he's not really in the photo, and that's brought me a lot of enjoyment.
Immense. I think it's brought everybody joy.
It is going to bring me joy for weeks to come.
I also share in Cagle's immense joy of excluding Justin from all of our pictures.
I would also like to thank John Lambert for booking us the most ghetto Airbnb I have ever seen in my life.
I ran this by everybody, and nobody had a problem with it.
know what you're booking.
I didn't know what I was booking.
I didn't even look at it.